Welcome to my channel. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today I want to talk about my favorite camera to use in 2019 and the one that I'm going to enjoy in 2020, the Panasonic G85. Before we continue with this video, this is just a quick reminder for you to support my channel by liking this video, by sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you, and let's continue with the video. So today, I want to talk about the Panasonic G85, which in my opinion is the best mid-budget hybrid camera. So the Panasonic G85 was first released in 2016 to replace the older Panasonic G7. And when you look at the spec sheet, it was a very exciting camera when it was released at that time. So the Panasonic G85 improves on the older Panasonic cameras on few aspects. 1. It improves the shutter shock issue. 2. It improves on the sensor stabilization for both still and video. 3. It removes the low pass filter on the sensor to improve sharpness. Last but not least, compared to the G7, now the G85 has some weather sealing. And ever since the Panasonic G85 was released, it has now become a very popular hybrid camera for stills and video. A lot of YouTubers nowadays use this camera because it really fits their need when it comes to video making tool. And a lot of people are also using the Panasonic G85 for photo. Although the Panasonic G85 was released 4 years ago, it is still a favorite camera for so many people today. I'm still also using the Panasonic G85 as well because it is really a good camera and it's very easy and pleasing to use. Now a little bit of a backstory. I purchased the G85 last year to replace my already old and broken GX7. At that time, I need to replace the GX7 with another camera that can really do well in both photo and video. I don't really need the latest or the greatest. I just need a good camera that is more than good enough for what I need. All I need for the camera that's going to replace the GX7 is a camera that is small, lightweight, and produces good enough image quality as well as video footage. Now the keyword here is more than good enough.
More than good enough.
Now what I really want to emphasize in this video is that all your purchase decision shouldn't be based on the latest or the greatest. I mean, this is a 4 years old camera, but this camera performs wonderfully for me because it really suits my need. A camera that looks perfect on spec sheet might not be the best camera that will suit you. You really have to ask yourself, what do you really need?
What do I really need?
You'll have to come up with list of things that you really need from a camera. You have to write it down and keep it close to you so that when you need to make a camera purchase decision, you can refer back to that list and you can avoid being tempted by the specs and features that you don't really need. Speaking of my needs from a camera, here's my needs for the G85. It should be small, it should be able to handle my existing micro four thirds lenses, it should be able to shoot 1080p in 50 frames per second video, it should also be able to handle 25 frames per second for 1080p and 4K, and it should be able to shoot raw photo with good enough image quality and good enough dynamic range for digital viewing. I also want the camera to have built-in sensor stabilization so that I can use my prime lenses that's unstabilized for shooting video. Last but not least, I want the camera to have microphone jack, hot shoe, and swivel screen. Speaking of image quality, I'm already happy with the result of the GX7 that I already sold, so if it doesn't have a new sensor, I'm fine with it. With all of these considerations, I went ahead and purchased the G85 in 2019. And I wasn't disappointed at all, because the G85 really delivers. Now let's talk about some positive aspects of this camera. First, the overall handling of this camera is just perfect. Now the Panasonic G85 isn't as large or beefy as the Panasonic GH5, but it's good enough for me to handle. It's very easy to reach all the buttons that I need to reach, and the layout as well as the control is very easy to use. I was able to quickly memorize where all the important buttons are, and within a few days using this camera is just like second nature. I'd also like to mention about the grip of the camera because it's really beefy and it's really easy to hold. I also like that now the SD card compartment is separated from the battery compartment below. Furthermore, the battery compartment is now placed farther enough from the center of the camera so that when I'm attaching a tripod to this camera, it's not gonna block the battery door. Now interestingly, the form factor of the G85 is almost as small as my rangefinder GX8. Now the G85 is slightly narrower when compared to the GX8 and it's just slightly taller when compared to the height of the GX8. As a bonus, the G85 is actually weather sealed, so I can start to use this camera in a slightly bad weather. Next, let's talk about the performance of this camera. When it comes to single point, single shot autofocus, the camera really delivers. Now continuous autofocus is good enough, but sometimes it can get a little bit wobbly. So Panasonic uses depth from defocus system, which is basically an advanced contrast-based autofocus system, and that basically means that this is really good for single shot, but it suffers a little bit when it comes to continuous autofocus. So I wouldn't say that the autofocus is perfect, but for my needs, it is more than good enough. A little tip for you: if you're shooting video, when you switch to 1080p, the continuous autofocus will be slightly faster when compared to the 4K and it's more accurate. Still talking about the performance of the camera, the burst shooting is really good enough and the buffer is big enough for my need so that you can shoot raw and you won't fill up the buffer too quickly. Stabilization performs wonderfully enough for me. It is more than enough for my need because now I can start to use a prime lens and just stabilize my video footage when using that lens. The Panasonic G85 doesn't require me to use stabilized lens in order to make the video stabilization work, so now I can use unstabilized prime lens like this one to make video footage smooth, and that really opens up a lot of new opportunity when I'm shooting video. Still talking about performance, before the Panasonic G85 come out, there are lots of Panasonic cameras that suffer from an issue called shutter shock. Basically, you get blurry pictures when you're shooting at certain shutter speed, usually between 1/30th of a second up to 1/250th of a second. Basically, this is caused by a faulty shutter mechanism on older Panasonic cameras such as my GX8. So that if you're taking a picture using regular shutter, it'll cause some vibration on the sensor and thus it makes the pictures look a bit blurry. So back then when I'm using my GX8, the way that I remedy this issue is by using electronic shutter, which makes no vibration at all to the shutter mechanism. Now Panasonic developed a new shutter system for the Panasonic G85 so that now it doesn't suffer from the shutter shock issue anymore. I no longer need to shoot using electronic shutter on this camera and the result won't be blurry at all. This is a big plus for me because now it improves the usability and image quality when I'm shooting still pictures. Now speaking of image quality, this camera produces image quality and video result that is more than good enough for me. Now when it comes to image quality, we can debate all day long about micro four thirds versus full frame or APS-C. Now I will stop you right there and just say that this camera produces image quality that is not the best, but is good enough for most of my needs. Now if you don't believe me, just take a look at these pictures. Now speaking of video result, this camera is now my main YouTube camera. Go to my channel and watch all of my videos from mid-2019 up until today. All of them or most of them are recorded using this Panasonic G85. I'm very pleased with the video result of the Panasonic G85.
Nice!
Both the 4K and the 1080p footage looks really good, and the 4K crop is not too bad, even when compared to the Panasonic G95, which has more 4K crop compared to the older G85 that I have right here.
Oh my god!
Now with the sensor stabilization in this camera being really good, I can now use this Panasonic G85 as my run and gun hybrid photo and video camera. Now I won't say to you that the video quality result is the best. It might still make some noise at high ISO and the color isn't really the best coming out from the Panasonic G85, but those are really minor complaints because the overall look, the overall quality and the overall sharpness of the video footage are really more than good enough for me. The video sensor readout is pretty fast, so there's no jello effect when you do panning during video. Now I use the Panasonic G85 intensively, not just for video but also for stills. And because I do strobe photography quite frequently, I require the Panasonic G85 to be able to do just that. Basically, I need the camera to have hot shoe and good enough sync speed. Unfortunately, on the spec, the G85 only has 1/160th of a second sync speed. But after some real life testing, I was able to reach 1/250th of a second without any flash sync problem. So that was really a pleasant surprise for me. And combined with the lack of shutter shock, the strobe photo result coming out from the G85 is really good. Before I forgot to mention, because this camera is a Micro Four Thirds camera, it has access to a great lens ecosystem. Basically, you can find all kinds of lenses that you want, from wide angle all the way to ultra telephoto, and you can even adapt other camera formats lenses to this camera using adapters. So basically with the G85, you'll be able to use any kind of lenses that you want. And sometimes there are lenses that are available in Micro Four Thirds that doesn't exist in other camera formats, such as this Laowa 7.5mm f2 wide angle with large aperture, or the new Panasonic 10-25 f1.7. Now there are of course some negatives when it comes to the Panasonic G85. Now we could go on and on and on about how bad the image quality of a Micro Four Thirds is when compared to a full frame. We could also complain all day long about the lack of face detect autofocus system, which could really help the continuous autofocus on the Panasonic G85. We can really nitpick all we want about the spec of the Panasonic G85, but in the end, it's all just about the spec, not the real world usage. And before I end the video, I just want to emphasize once again the importance of getting what you need as opposed to getting what you want or having the latest or the greatest. That's all that really matters in real world usage. I'm pretty sure that the Panasonic G85 isn't the camera for everybody. Because let's be honest, different people have different needs. If somebody needs great continuous autofocus during video, then Panasonic G85 might not be the perfect camera for them. They might be better served with a Canon mirrorless camera that has dual pixel autofocus. Or if somebody needs a mirrorless full frame camera that has great image quality, then the Panasonic G85 obviously won't fit that bill. They'll be better served with the Sony Alpha 7 series, and so on. All that I can say is that this camera is the best camera for my needs. This camera is not the latest nor the greatest, and the spec sheet doesn't look impressive at all in 2020. But the camera delivers more than good enough image quality for both photo and video. That is all for today's video. I hope you find this video to be useful. Please share in the comments down below what is your favorite camera to use in 2019 and what's the camera that you use in 2020. Also, don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you and goodbye.